G'day Bomber fans, that was a tough one. It was rough going into the game with all the injuries, but it was a bloody hard loss, our fourth in a row. Our former Star Crichton medal winner kicked 6 on us. Before I get into the rough review though, leave your best on ground votes, Essendon players only in the comments, Brownlow style 3, 2, 1, and stay tuned till the end of the video to find out how you can save 20% off at Manscaped. So we started this game with, I don't want to say a bang, so I will say direction. We clearly went into this game with a very defensive mindset as a team. From centre bounces, we threw numbers back to assist with our undersized defence. We had no Ridley, Laverty, Kelly, Reed or Stewart, so we were playing BZT, Redman and Kane Baldwin down there, sometimes even Heppel on their three-pronged key forward line, which was rough to say the least. They also had a midfield advantage because we were missing Darcy Parish, our clearance machine, so they had 16 inside 50s early, but our defence held up. We only conceded the 2 goals, but territory was a worry. They locked it in a few times and made it hard for us to leave, which is why we barely scored ourselves. The second quarter was much of the same, but with more direction. We threw numbers back, which made it hard for us to score going the other way, but also made it hard for them to kick goals because of how congested it was. In fact, I think the fact our setup was so strange helped. We worked so hard as a team to help out in D50 and worked harder to go the other way. We looked different to how we have all year with our wave running. There was less system and more chaos, I will say. But a big issue I don't see talked about enough was contested marking. They seemed better suited in the air, which makes sense as we had many of our tools out of the side, and with that came one less way to move the ball forward. We could only really go slowly through short field kicking or through pure chaos and run, no in between. Luckily for us, they weren't kicking well in front of the sticks. We had the same amount of scoring shots at halftime, but led by 10 points. So we were taking our chances and it showed on the scoreboard. We needed to be on the ball and take chances, and we did early. They did not. All in all, it was a really promising first half. We clearly knew how to win the game, and all signs pointed towards us being the team to go on and win if we continued to play the way we were, but we all know what happens next. After halftime, it happened. The damn walls burst open. They kicked 3 goals in about 5 minutes, and we looked helpless going forward. It was us holding onto the match by a thread for most of the term until our former forward, Joe Danaher, kicked us out of it. The real issue of that second half was the fact that the game opened up, and it did this because they found it easy to score shortly after centre bounces when 6-6-6 rule was in place, so we couldn't throw numbers back in time to help out, which meant our undersized defence was exposed and couldn't compete in the air. We only really looked like bringing the ball to ground when we had an extra 1 or 2 forwards or wingmen staying back loose in the back line. It's why we couldn't find territory down the ground early, but why they couldn't score. But as the match opened up, that changed. And this was highlighted when Dylan Shield left the ground for a short period of time with an ankle complaint. We couldn't win a clearance without him because we were also missing Parish, of course. So we only really had merit of note going up against a Brownlow medalist and his teammates trying to win clearances to keep us in the match. And even when we did manage to slow the game down, there were still instances when we had mismatches in defense. In weeks prior, players like Kelly or Redmond would be left on a key if forwards found space from their direct opponents, but because of the injuries, the players that were forced to match up on Gunston or Hipwood at times were Dyson Heppel and even Nick Martin, who worked really hard to provide defensive options down back, but simply couldn't compete with their height. There were 5 inside 50s from us in the third quarter and 22 from them, and this stayed a theme in the final as well. We couldn't contain them in the guts or in defense, and their defense was all over us in the forward line. It sucked because we looked in the game in the first half, but we were exposed in the second. We didn't look competitive at all, and that cannot be blamed on injuries. The first half ended with us 4 goals 5 to their 2 goals 7, a respectable figure away from home, but the second half had them scoring 10 goals 8 to our 2 goals 4. It was a no contest they won with ease. So how did they win? Well, there are many things to talk about here. For starters, there were some things we just could not control, and going into the game we had our backs against the wall. Our injury list is mounting, especially in defence. For us to see Joe Danaher, Eric Hipwood, Jack Dunstan and Charlie Cameron playing without defenders like Laverty, Ridley and Kelly is a huge loss, especially because there were no replacements, no Stewart, no Reed. We had to play Redman out of position on a key forward, and Kane Baldwin came into the side, who, to be fair, held his own. I was impressed with most of what I saw, but this isn't why we lost. We can't really use excuses when we've been playing good footy all year. We lost because they controlled possession in their territory. Our defence actually held up incredibly well, but they had 69 inside 50s. We had 38. We were dominated in this area. Without Parish, we were exposed. No clearances came with any promise whatsoever. And the frustrating thing was we weren't entering 50 well either. Wiedemann was shafted by entries. He had some good leading patterns ruined by wayward kicks. It's why we only had 8 marks inside 50 and they had more than double with 17. Brisbane not only had the most inside 50s of any team this season, but they had the ball in their forward half of the ground for 65% of the match, and it's no surprise that this came from clearance clearances. We won the first half count by a fair amount. They won the second. We may have that stat line in our favour on paper. We got up by 1 clearance, but just look at how impactful theirs were compared to ours. And like I said earlier, our lack of height meant we had no kick and hope options, so they ate up any long and high balls down the line. In fact, we had 6 contested marks. They had 19. So when you see players like Nick Hind running himself into trouble, or players in defence biting off more than they can chew and turning it over, it's because we were trying to avoid McInerney, Andrews and Payne down the line, who had our exit kicks under control. And then you have the fact that players like Draper and Wiedemann, who have been in form, struggled to get involved, so too Jake Stringer. It's hard travelling to the Gabba to play the Lions with many players missing and key players playing poorly. It was tough to watch, especially because on the flip side, Lockie Neal had a day out and Joe Danaher kicked 6. The thing is, we clearly could have won this game. We showed how we could have won that game in the first half, so we can't really use injuries as an excuse, but that second half is exactly how I expected the game to go. I am not devastated with the result. There was plenty to dislike, and it was a bit of a reality check for us, but developmentally wise, there are still things to like. We had one of the best sides on the ropes early. We were beating the best clearance team in the comp in the first half. We kept them to under a handful of goals at home, a home that they haven't lost at this year. They beat Collingwood and Melbourne here. This is a fortress, and we look to have infiltrated it for an hour at least. And our defense held up. We conceded the most inside 50s of the year, but only had 12 goals kicked on us. That is impressive, especially because we were playing in defense with a lineup that I could not have pictured us using this year. I was really proud of how our defense stood up, because our midfield was just not up to it at all. In the end, it's a tale of two halves. We were fantastic and sound early. We were on top, and in the second we lost control. We could not compete with a far better team. They were on, we were not. They deserved to win, probably by more if I'm being honest with myself. But enough of that, let's get to some votes. One to our former captain Dyson Heppel, who had such a tough role, often matching up on players much taller. He had 21 disposals at 95% efficiency with 11 marks, many of which were crucial in stopping Lions plays. He was one of few that could hold their heads up high. Andy McGrath gets 2 votes. He pocketed Charlie Cameron all night, kept him goalless, but also had plenty of the ball himself. And Mason Redman gets all 3. It's all defenders here, but he in particular stood up so well in defence, not only competed well, but had plenty of the ball the other way as well. Some unlucky not to get votes. Merritt and Setterfield battled in the guts all night, but were unable to match the impact of the opposition. Langford didn't have much of the pill, but always was huge with it. And special mention to Ben Hobbs, who played his best game for the club, I reckon. I'm sure many of you will give him votes as well. But that's that. Review done. We have some easier games coming up, fortunately, so stay tuned for the preview for our Dreamtime game on Wednesday, and also a word from Manscaped. Bomber fans, it's always tough after a loss, so why not treat yourself to a cheeky little shopping haul with Manscaped, and with me, you can lower that price as well. Buy whatever you like and use the discount code EverythingEssendon20 to get 20% off at manscaped.com plus free shipping. That is EverythingEssendon20 for 20% off plus free shipping. See you on Wednesday, Bomber fans.